is being recorded.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, guys, welcome back. We had a new episode of Industrious here with Stu, UCC alumni. And so, yeah, we're going to kick things off, walking through a bunch of little topics here. His UCC time, his time at university, and onto the work for it. So, Stu, we'll kick things off. All of us are boarders on the call. As we said, Charles and I from Seton's, Matt from Wes. We just want to hear a little insight about what your boarding experience was like, what your SHAs or, who was in charge and what was it like? What were your favorite memories there?
So you didn't ask this, but I'll tell you anyway. I started out as a day boy for the first 2 years. So I have experience doing that, and then experience in the boarding house, but I was in Seton's as well. The thing about boarding, I remember when I went into boarding, even though I'd been at the school for 2 years, it very much felt like going to a new school. Because I'm sure this has improved over time, but at least when I was there, there was definitely like a cultural split between the boarding kids and the day kids for sure. And so going into boarding, it was a little bit intimidating because boarding, at least back in my day, had its little its little reputation and whatever, and it was a little intimidating. But I remember you guys may have done this as well. They took us up to Norval for before classes started in the fall, and there was another new guy. I say new guy, already in the school, but there was another guy who was new to the school, new to boarding, who was there, and I saw him, and he seemed like a friendly character. I introduced myself, and we started talking, and that guy is still my best friend to this day. And so I open up my experiences in boarding with that story, just because that really encapsulates what boarding was to me, which was some of the closest friends I have in my life to this day as a 34-year-old are the people who I met when I was 14, 15, in boarding. So it's really hard to match just the amount of time and the kind of time that you spend with people that you do in boarding, particularly during those years of your life where everything is changing, everything's kind of coming together. And it's an incredibly meaningful part of my UCC experience, my life experience. I remember our head of house, I'm probably house master, I think is the actual title, was Mr. McKay, and he was an absolute legend. I'm not sure if you guys got to spend any time with Mr. McKay, but he was awesome. And the thing I really liked about him, right, is it's tough to be away from your parents at that age. Is old enough now to admit it. Tough to be away from your parents at that age. And McKay was like very much like a stand-in dad in all the best ways. And so I have exclusively fond memories of my boarding experience. It was great. Hopefully you guys had the same.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, like Charles' first day, that's who I met, and I would not have pictured us being on a call 2 years, 3 years later, just starting things left, right, and center. And then the Norval experience is still going strong. I had the same things too. I was day boy first, and then into boarding, so definitely the same kind of thing. And Chuck played hockey, so he was with McKay.
Yeah, I got to know McKay pretty well, and he's an absolute legend. You're right on with that for sure. He was an MOD when Jack and I were in Seton, so we got to spend a bit of time with him each week, which was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we had a few other guys. I'm trying to remember. Ian Schnarr was one of them. I don't know if he ever cycled back through. No? Okay. I'll stop there, because otherwise I'm just going to age myself with a bunch of guys who are no longer on the roster. But no, boarding was great. Yeah, boarding was amazing.
Yeah. I could chime in, Stu, because it's interesting you mentioned how the switch from day to boarding, it's like intimidating. I want to relate it back to kind of, I was reading about one of the articles about with the Stampeders about how when you were a kid, you didn't go to kindergarten, you went straight to grade 1. I just find that super fascinating. So I imagine that you went into boarding as probably one of the younger ones. So could you like kind of just out of curiosity, walk us through that experience, like just being, 2 years younger than everyone else, and like what was that experience like for a high school, for a college?
Wow, that's a great question. So this has been until later in my life, this was always an albatross, right? Which, my parents were very proud to tell all their friends, oh, my 4-year-old's in first grade, isn't that awesome? But it's a challenge, right? And like it's all good up till eighth grade, because when you're like 12 and the other kids are 14, there's really not that big of a difference. But um, when you hit UCC, and UCC is not just a regular high school, right? Like it's a collection of intense, for lack of a better word in the moment, people who are, they're there to succeed, they're there to do well. So age is actually just sort of icing on top of this cake of, competitive environment. What you can't control age, right? So you come in and you're a couple years younger than the other day boys, and then you're up to 4 years younger than some of the other boarders that are, that are in your year. So it's something that you wrangle with, and it's like you look back on the time and it's like, yeah, being younger was certainly a part of the reason why it was like, oh, this is a bit of an intimidating transition, because I switched between, and again, I don't know if they still call it foundation year, IB1, IB2 or whatever, but at the time, foundation year, 10th grade, I switched between foundation year and IB1. And at the time, IB1 was a big incoming year for new boarders. A lot of kids from Quebec who had finished their CEGEP years, or were pre-CEGEP, right? They finished their Quebec high school and they were coming in pre-CEGEP. So it's funny. So when I graduated UCC, I was 16 on graduation day, and there was guys in my class who were 20. And I remember there was like an ongoing like thing that everybody was kind of aware of. And there was one guy who we did the math where if I had started in year 2 on graduation day, when he graduated, I would still be younger than him. If I'd started year 2 when I was 16 and graduated, still be younger than him when he graduated out of IB2. So, I mean, the good thing about it, right, is it's always good to be around older guys that can teach you a lot about the world. But at the same time, it's, particularly in that age range, right? Like, everybody hits puberty at a different time. Everybody kind of, learns different things in life at a different time. And, 2 years can be a big spread between guys in their teens, and 4 years is a, major spread. But, net, it was a positive, I think.
Yeah. Chuck, you wanted to talk about sports there, pal?
Yeah, so I mean, sports played a pretty big role in my experience at UCC, and I mean, just kind of reading your bio, I assume it played a large role for you as well. So could you just talk a little bit about that? I know obviously you played football, so yeah, please talk about that and any other athletic experiences you had at the college.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I was in a position before I even decided to enroll at UCC. You're looking at a few schools. I remember I looked at Trinity out in Port Hope, SAC. I don't know if you're even allowed to admit that. Ridley, a few other schools. And what you're looking at when you're sort of checking these different places out, right? It's like, obviously the academics is the most important thing. Everybody on this chat, I'm sure, their parents focused on that with them. But, you want to be able to pursue the sports stuff, despite their objections at times. But UCC, one of the reasons it stood out, so I played AAA hockey up through 8th grade. And, when I did all my interview stuff, they were certainly, I got to think that was a part of my interview package, was that I could potentially contribute, on the hockey front. So hockey was sort of the sport for me before I'd ever set foot at UCC that that I'd had the most experience with. But it's interesting because this age thing, and I imagine it's going to come up more, as you guys know, right? Like our varsity hockey team, there's like randomly guys drafted into the NHL off of that thing. When I was there, Colin Greening, got drafted right into the NHL off of that. And so if you looked at my 13-year-old self, which is what I was when I came into year 2, getting on the ice with some of these guys, it was like, okay, that's not necessarily going to happen. And so, I still did play hockey at UCC, not on the varsity team. But what I did as a result of that is I started to explore other sports. I'd never played football before. And so I got my first taste of playing football on the JV team. And like, it's crazy looking back, but even the JV football team for me as a year two was like this, I'm going to get my ass kicked situation, right? Like, I was small. I was like just not ready for it, but I went out there anyway. Had a great time. More great friends, great characters. One of my favorite people who was a professor of mine, while I was there, Dr. John Thomas. He's unfortunately no longer with us, but he was the coach of the team at the time, and Mario Storino, who I think you guys probably are familiar with. They were the coaches, and they made football so much fun for me. And as you guys know, like I continue to play football for 10, 12 years after I started at UCC, and I ended up playing professionally. And if not for my experience at UCC, that's just not something that would happen. So I owe a lot to that. And like I say, it was an intimidating environment to step into. And if not for guys like Storino and Thomas sort of putting your arm around you, saying like, yeah, you're small today, and you're young today, but you won't always be small. You won't always be young. Stick at it, and this will be something that maybe you'll like, maybe you won't. Of course, in ninth grade, nobody knows where it's going to go, but no, it's a great experience. I played a little baseball there as well. I had a couple seasons of lacrosse, but I guess the big takeaway, right, is like academics obviously the focus at UCC, but we're no slouch on the athletic side as well, and the balance of the experience was important. Did you guys play? Charles, did you play hockey?
I played hockey, football, and rugby. Yeah.
Andy rowed.
Okay.
It's good.
And rowing. Oh my God, that's a lot. What about you guys, Jack and Matthew? You guys played sports too?
Yeah, I did rowing for most of the 4 years. And then last semester Chuck got me to get onto rugby. So I played that, and he pushed me in that direction. So that was fun.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Who's the rugby coach these days?
Andrew McCubbin.
Okay, because in my day it was Coach Shaw.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dave Shaw, but Dave Shaw, he was also the football coach. He was the first football coach, and he used to pressure me every year to come play rugby. But I played summer football for the Metro Toronto Wildcats. So I'd be like, no, I gotta do summer football, and he hated me for never playing rugby. Although I don't think I would ever been that good at rugby, but
Wow. Yeah, Stu, I played varsity soccer, and I also tried rugby my senior spring. Best decision I ever made. Just a great group of guys, as you said, like in the locker room, with guys like Charles and like, our captain, Graham, like just like being part of that, like, camaraderie is like something I will kind of take with me for the rest of my life. So, with our last interview, Stu, we interviewed with Mark Andre. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He ran D1 track at Yale. So he was talking about his like recruitment journey. Can you talk about kind of, your senior year or junior year at UCC? What was that recruitment journey like for you to play college football?
So another great question. The trend of like for football, obviously, right? Like for at least when I was in high school, like the reputation of Canadian high school football was not stellar. Relative if you're looking at it from an American's perspective, right? Like they would sort of look down on Canadian high school football. And so at the time there was pretty minimal levels of recruiting going on of Canadian, kids. The pathway at the time, if you were a Canadian kid and you wanted to go play like serious D1 college football, is that, we had guys that would go off, finish grade 12, and they go off and do 2 years of CEGEP in Quebec, as a way to get a look. There was guys who were doing, an extra year of high school. The physicality of the American kids is just something that was, I think, tough at the time for Canadians to catch up with. So my recruiting process was very much self-driven. in the sense that it was my goal. I wanted to go play, U.S. college football, and I didn't have my phone ringing off the hook as a junior, like a lot of these, kids in the States do, to get a scholarship. And so it was kind of incumbent upon me to go market myself and see if I could, create any kinds of opportunities. And so the summer before my senior year, I went out and I visited a bunch of colleges, and again, not on the basis of football at all. It was just a, regular way academic visit, and I would make my way into their, to their football coach's office if he was there, and sort of establish a dialogue, and then say, I'm going to send you some film. I'm going to keep you, posted through the fall. And again, this age thing comes up, right? Which is, your 15, 16-year-old kid, which is not what we're recruiting in D1 football, right? And so, the experience I had was I had some schools that were very familiar with UCC for its, academic reputation. Specifically UNC is a good example. And you guys, between the two of our eras, here, there was a kid, Alan Champagne, who went to the UCC, who unbelievable student, unbelievable athlete. He ended up at UNC. That was what I wish, may have happened for me, right? I had a great dialogue with them. They knew the school, plenty of experience with the students, and they loved it. And then it was like, if you have an athletic interest, right, like we're all for supporting that. So I'd had a dialogue with them that was like, you're probably too young to just come here as a freshman and play. 16-year-old, 17-year-old kid coming playing, D1 football is a bit tough. So, I took that feedback, and I had, some other dialogues with some smaller, some 1AA schools like Davidson, and some Division III schools with good academics. And sort of my initial plan was like, okay, I'm not gonna, do more high school, which is what some people do in order to sort of get more film and do that. Parents, as I alluded to earlier, were much more focused on the academics than the athletics, and that was just not something where there was a ton of support. And so, I had a lot of interest from some smaller schools. And so the plan was, let's go to the smaller school and, see how it goes. And if things go well, see about, transferring out. And maybe we'll get there later in our conversation, but I ended up meeting my wife as a freshman at this smaller school that I ended up going to. And I knew that we probably would, I don't know if I knew we would get married, but at least knew enough at the time that I probably shouldn't transfer.
No, fair enough.
Yeah, so could you so I also had a fairly similar experience. Obviously mine was with rugby. I'm playing now rugby at a D3 school in the US as well. So yeah, I know that recruiting process can be pretty hectic and pretty hands-on, especially if you kind of need to take that initiative yourself and go out and seek those opportunities and be a self-advocate, like the college counselor for boarding, Mr. Turner, loves to say. So could you just talk a little bit about your experience as an athlete once you got there and what that was like?
In college or at UCC?
In college.
In college, so it was great. So the school I ended up going to it's called Trinity University. It's in San Antonio, Texas, and this is it was a Division III school. It's still a Division III school, but it's a top 5, top 10 perennial Division III school. And so I went and I did true recruiting visits to this school, and it was so cool, right? Like, you're down in Texas, college football. They've got a big stadium. It's everything you sort of picture. It's it's not quite Ohio State, but it's it was pretty cool. Coming from where I was coming from, I did realize, when I first got there, right, that like these people take their football very seriously. And I had never been in an environment where people took football half as seriously as they did when I got there. And UCC, I think, is good about teaching time management, for folks, right? Like they at least when I was there, they mandated that you had to participate in some stuff that wasn't school, which I think is a good way of, getting people to understand that, like, yeah, you've got school, you've got homework, but, life, the life that, you probably want to live mandates more complexity than that. and so the thing, about the athletic experience that I think is like, it was the most, practical in life and sort of notable here is that like really forced you to say, I can't waste an hour in a day, right? Like, I mean, a lot of summers I'm sure we've all spent, some lazy sitting in bed, sitting in the backyard, scrolling on the doom scrolling, doing all that stuff. But like when you're in that environment, right, it's like there's no time. There's no like loose time to just give to anything. It's like if the sport is taking up your spare time, and then you need to still force yourself when you're exhausted from practice and all that stuff, force yourself to still meet these other priorities that you didn't meet earlier in the day, and all you want to do is go to sleep or see what's going on down the hall with your friends in the dorms or whatever. But like that was what it really taught you, is like, if you want to succeed at more than one thing in life, and that's still like applicable today, right? Like you can succeed at your job and be a bad husband, dad, or whatever, right? Like because you don't manage your time well. And so this athletic experience in college, I think the big takeaway was like, you have to really be focused on sort of the insidious nature of time wasting. And, on conversely, right, like managing your time well and making sure that like you ever catch yourself sitting there doing nothing, you're like, there's no time for doing nothing. I don't have that time. That's either sleep or, productivity of my athletic priority or my academic priority. So that was cool. The other cool thing about the college football experience was just the different travel that I got to do. Cause like there's, when you're playing at that level, like you're going to small towns and, college towns in the, South and Southwest that like nobody on this call would have ever heard of, right? If not for there being this little college there that, you're going to go play and hopefully win, given a lot of things. So that was really neat. And then, seems like you guys are the same way, but like, the opportunity to be on a team, that's one of the, you try to supplement it in your professional life, but it's not the same. Being on a team is a thing that, I hope in my life comes up again, but truly being on a team, that was one of the great experiences of the athletic experience in college for sure.
Yeah, and Stu, like obviously Matt and I aren't quite on the same sports echelon as Charles is here, but from UCC we still get the same wish to be on a sports team and the environment. But I just want to touch on like clarify a little thing, because I know you were playing football at Trinity, but then you went in to do your first master's, and I'm a little bit foggy on how that transition happened, like and with football, or how did that work exactly?
Oh, what a great question. This is when I get my background checks done, this is what they ask as well. They're like, how are you in 3 places at once? So it was complicated. And you got to remember, right? Like I was coming out of a small school. And so the same thing that was true coming out of UCC was true coming out of this school, which was that, if I had sat there and did nothing, there would have been no interest. So other than the CFL stuff, like if you're a Canadian kid, quick CFL digression here. So in the CFL, they have this rule, imports and non-imports, right? And so they have to have half, at least when I was playing, that half the roster had to be what they called a non-import player, which is a Canadian born, kid. And so they have to have, at least at the time, half the roster be Canadian born kids. And so if you understand football demographics, that's not how it breaks down, right? So there's this inordinate opportunity for Canadian kids. So if you're a Canadian kid, you go off to play at a U.S. college, they're going to keep an eye on you. Mm-hmm. They're going to keep an eye on you, and they're going to give you a look. And so, so another quick digression. My first year down there, I got mono, kissing too many girls, and I caught mono. And when you get mono, your spleen swells. I don't know if have you guys had mono?
Charles has.
Yeah.
Charles has. Okay, so you get mono, and your spleen actually gets inflamed. They call it a splenomegaly, right? And one of the key things for that is like you cannot play contact sports if you have inflamed spleen. You rupture your spleen, they got to take it out. You're taking pills for the rest of your life. So I won't go into too many details, but I did a lot to disguise the fact that I had mono and I had this spleen issue, and it did result in, unfortunately, me not fully rupturing my spleen, but having a bit of an issue with playing too much football my freshman year with this swollen spleen. And so I actually did go home in the middle of October and take like a medical leave from the first year of school. And so that introduced some complexity, and the reason I'm digressing into the whole football situation later, which was I actually took on first half of a fifth year in school because I'd missed that first semester. And so what that did was make me sort of a non-conforming person in terms of, the CFL's ability to say, this is your draft year, this is when you'd come out, this is when you do everything. And so the first conversation I'd had pre-draft in 2010 was with the Hamilton Tiger-Cats, who were like, what's your story? What are you going to do? Are you going back to school? Are you going to come out? What's sort of the situation? And that thing we've talked about a couple times, which is the parents saying,
academics,
your little athletic endeavors are, not that interesting, but your academic stuff is certainly a focus, came up again. And it was like, what do you tell somebody making that call to you, right? It's like, well, I don't know, man. And the second you say, I don't know, or, you're non-committal and you're not a superstar in these contexts, it's like, okay, like I'm not going to risk a scarce resource in a draft pick on this guy or any of this kind of stuff. And so it kind of went by the wayside, and I had the fifth half year that I did, and again, makes you kind of non-conforming. But even just the phone call and sort of the subsequent interest I had coming out of the CFL was enough that it was like, I want to explore this. I want to see if this is possible, right? I mean, if you kind of sniff something like that, you want to taste it too. And so I sort of set upon a task of being, okay, I'm going to train and sort of see if I can reopen this door. My draft opportunity had sort of passed by for the CFL, but maybe there was an opportunity to get a tryout. And so in that sort of spring of 2011, I did a workout with the Ticats, and at the time I was playing defensive end. And hopefully folks who watch this are a little bit football interested, because I'm going to get into football stuff a little bit. But I was a defensive end. I was like, 6'5", 290, right? Which, if you watch the CFL, that's not a defensive end, because defensive ends in the CFL are SEC linebackers who are like 260 and run 4.4 or 4.5 second 40s. That's not me. That was never me. Just to be very clear. And so, I went out and I was also a long snapper, and I was like, okay, this guy's interesting, but he's not going to play defensive end in the CFL, and we need to deliver this message to this guy, right? And so they told me, they were like, you have potential as an offensive lineman, but not as a defensive lineman, so give it up. If you want to come back and be an offensive lineman, you're going to have to go and play semi-pro, minor league, all this kind of stuff to get film as an offensive lineman, because I didn't have film as an O-lineman, to sort of see if the opportunity was there. So that's what I did. 2011, 2012, I went and I played in a minor professional football league. That's MPFL is what it was called, and it was sort of California to Florida teams. And I did this travel football, and I'm getting to your question eventually here. But that doesn't pay a lot of money. That doesn't pay the bills. And my now wife, at the time girlfriend, she was in law school, and they don't pay you to go to law school either. And so I took on a side job. Well, I say side job. This is my real job. This was my main day-to-day focus, which was in tech sales in Austin. I was selling software and services that lawyers use to manage like the discovery process of litigation. I won't go in depth on that, because I know no one's interested in that. But that's what I was doing there. And so when I was working for that company was interested in sort of developing my professional skill set. And so they said, listen, this was in Austin, Texas, by the way. My wife and I were then girlfriend, now wife, living in Austin, Texas. where, you know, there's a very good school, University of Texas at Austin, and this company was like, you know, listen, we'd love you, you know, to keep advancing your education. This was sort of a startup company. It was a tech-driven company, and they were like, you know, sales and marketing is your thing. Why don't we kind of help you enroll in this program? And so they supported me enrolling in a master's program at University of Texas, which was technology commercialization, which is not an MBA, not an MS, whatever. Like it's I don't know how many schools even offer this thing, right? But it was basically my employer at that time was very much like, this is a valuable use of your time. We were selling a. It's funny, the AI stuff is kicking up now, and the stuff I'm telling you about is close to 15 years ago now. And this was effectively an AI-driven company at the time, using a Bayesian algorithm. And again, Jack, you gotta, you know, hold up like 4 fingers if I'm getting too much into the weeds here. But
no, you're good.
you know, this Bayesian algorithm thing, right? And so it was like, again, this was not my forte, was understanding the Bayesian. My understanding was, you know, I'll talk to the engineers, figure out what they're saying, and then, you know, figure out how we sell this to lay people, right? And that's what they wanted me to go do for this master's, technology commercialization master's, to sort of figure out how we take this great idea that these smart people came up with and, you know, sell it to people. And so I'm doing that. I'm going to all these football tryouts. I'm trying out for, you know, I went to Las Vegas. I tried out for the Las Vegas Locomotives of the UFL, right? Like, I'm going all over the country. I'm doing these tryouts, these workouts. I'm in my master's program. I'm doing this job, basically just trying to play the optionality game, right? Like, I don't know what's going to work out. I don't know what's going to hit, but, you know, keep your fingers in a bunch of pies and see what happens. And ultimately, in 2013, I got invited to the NFL's Super Regional Combine, which is something that they put on for people from smaller schools, not the one that goes on TV. To be clear, not the one on TV. It's the one for the other guys to go to. And in 2013, I did that, and I did really well at that. The offensive line stuff had come along, and I ended up getting a tryout with the Dallas Cowboys, which was a really cool experience. And from there, then I signed a 2-year deal with the Calgary Stampeders, kind of coming out of that tryout with the Cowboys. And my employer at the time, and I finished up the master's right in May of 2013 as this was all happening. It all kind of came together. My employer at the time was like, we like you, we want to keep you around. We understand that, you know, guys get an experience, you know, opportunity like you're getting to have that kind of experience, you're going to take it. And so I actually kept working. So there was one day in training camp in 2013 with Calgary where after practice, the first practice of the day, I actually had to go up into the stands at McMahon Stadium in Calgary, and I had to get on a sales call for this company that I was working for. And like, I you know, we working on the deal. We eventually closed this deal, but I'm like closing it like with my bottoms on, you know, sitting in McMahon Stadium, like just still ridiculous, right? Like, and if anybody from the Stampeders, you know, found out like, oh, this guy's sitting in the, you know, stand dealing with his old job, I would have been snipped right then. Right? Like, come on, right? Like, you got to be fully committed.
Yeah.
But they snipped me later, so I waited a little while to do the deed. But no, it was a lot going on during those times for sure.
I just want to highlight here that, like, how old you are. You were like 19, 20 here, or maybe 21, but like, right?
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
So
no, so I'm in '89. So yeah, so I was a younger guy. I felt old coming into the evaluation, right? Because it's like I graduated earlier and I'd done this like little digression, but I was still the same, you know, by 2013, sort of the same age as everybody who was regular way coming out of college 3 years after I was done. Yeah.
It definitely a different path than most. Hey, but everything went the right way, so you're good.
I was just really curious, like during that time when you're like moving places to places, like how did well, first of all, how do you get invited to the NFL Combine, like right out of the D3 college? Like, was it like there were scouts at the semi-pro league, or like what was that process like segueing into like kind of the realm of NFL?
So and again, right, like the big combine we all watch on TV, that's by invite only, and you know they start putting your name on that list when you're, you know, freshman at Florida, or wherever, right? And they've got you very well tracked. And, you know, there's players who get drafted who don't even get invited to that big combine. So this super regional combine, the one I participated in, you apply. You tell them, I'm, you know, a smaller college player. This is my application. And the first order step that they do is they take applications and then they go do their own research. And the application, by the way, includes film. It includes, you know, stuff that's beyond just here's my height and weight and, you know, my interests and hobbies and all that. It's more than that. And then from there, they would invite you to a regional combine. So it's the first one where, you know, some cut of the people, they say, okay, do sort of a first order set of drills for us to see if it's worth inviting you to the main super regional combine that we have for smaller college players. So I did that, and then you do well enough, you know, you get invited onto the next one. I got invited onto the next one. And at that next one, so the super regionals, no one's there, right? Like these tryouts for the tryout, like nobody's there except for the league. The league is there running this thing. There's a number of people, by the way, who have had, you know, long, productive careers. There's actually, I don't think any Hall of Famers yet, but some people who maybe, you know, headed down that path who came out of the system. So it's valuable to the league to do it. It's just, they start with a very wide, you know, funnel at the top of people who say, I have an interest in seeing if, you know, you guys will even look at me or not, right? And then down into this super regional, which was actually a smaller number of people than go to the big combine. And so my year I did it, it was in Dallas, Texas. And so by the time you get to that one, it's in Dallas, Texas at the AT&T Stadium, the Cowboys' new, you know, brand new thing. And so it was a really cool experience to, you know, to do that. And all 32 teams were there, you know, up in the stands, and they were doing, you know, behavioral interviews, you know, between drills and after drills. And I was living in Texas at the time, and it was in Dallas. And so I think my opportunity to go do something for the Cowboys probably was a function of, you know, of all those things, right? And I'm, you know, comfortable with the reality that they weren't actually looking at me to sign me. They were bringing in somebody who wasn't, if got injured blocking somebody, right? I was an offensive lineman. If I'm blocking somebody on a 1-on-1 who they're actually interested in potentially signing and I get injured, no problem, right? But if you know, somebody they actually want to pay money to gets injured, that's a problem for them. But if, you know, you do exceptionally well in that position, maybe there's, you know, there's another step. It was a good experience for me, but you know, it's one of these things, right? Like the guys you watch on Sunday playing in that league who are doing it well year in and year out, those are very, very special people, you know, who've dedicated their life, you know, to all that. But it was a really cool experience, and I got to talk to a few teams, and even beyond what I just told you about, right? It was a lot of these other like invitations to go. You know, I remember one time I had to go to Cincinnati, and that was to try out for the BC Lions, you know, in Cincinnati, just randomly, right? So I went to Atlanta. Who was in Atlanta? One of the other teams, Eskimos or somebody. Like, you're flying all around the country, you know, every weekend to do these different things, and you know, it's cool. It's certainly a test of your, you know, if you don't want it, it would be really easy to stop, you know, stop trying, for sure.
No, yeah, that's definitely not it's a very busy schedule, more than most would take on. But I wanted to touch on, because I know we don't have not insane time left, but I want to touch on what a lot of guys are going to be interested in, which is your career now, in kind of banking generally, and like how your time kind of as an athlete and like really focusing on that has, like, you know, moved you. I know you worked at BMO, and now you're at RBC. You did capital markets. I think you're in M&A now. But just kind of how that transition happened. I know I'm jumping over a lot of like more football and a lot of, like, I know you were at Georgetown as well as a school there.
Oh,
but
no, well, that the Georgetown's going to come up. So basically where I find myself in like 2014, 2015, right, is out of football, you know, doing the tech sales stuff. And I really like the tech sales stuff. I like that company, but you know, at the time, nowadays, by the way, we should encourage our audience to definitely look into tech sales as a career, because those guys are killing it. But you know, a decade ago, there was more of a ceiling there, particularly in the space I was working in, and so it was like, I'm bored. was I was bored. And it was like I like being a sales guy, but bored. And so, you know, I went out and started trying to figure out like what's more engaging and exciting. And so, you know, I started hitting up the UCC network, of course, because finance. I remember people when I was in year 2 joking, you know, that make the teachers is making jokes at the school and being like, "Oh, you're going to work at RBC one day," and you know, it's like, "No, I won't," but here you are. But you know, you hit up the network and it's like, okay, these are the things I'm interested in. These are the things I like. And you know, when you say that you like doing sales, but you don't think that tech sales is quite pretentious enough for you, you know, the answer is like, well, banking, that's sales, baby. You know, like you got to go, you know, you go into banking, you can be a coverage guy, you can be a product guy, but it's all sales and it's very fancy sales. And so it was like, okay, that's a good answer, but how do I actually, like, you know, get there from the background I had, right? Like all of you are very focused, you know, freshman, sophomore year in college, and you know the path and you know what it takes to get there. When I was in your seat, I was focused on practice. And so if I had to go through, I talked to folks who are, you know, applying for our sophomore or junior, you know, internships now. And I tell all of them, I'm like, if I had to do what you're doing now, then when I was in your shoes, I would be an immediate get out of here. You know, you don't fit the bill. And so the exercise is like, okay, how do I get there, particularly as somebody who's coming from totally non-conforming, you know, path to come in. And sort of the answer was, and this is great, this is some of the best advice I've ever gotten in my whole life, is if you ever want people to help you doing something, right? And this is the advice I got, and I'll pass it on here. If you ever want anybody to help you doing something, the best way to compel somebody to be like, I have to help this person, is if you can utterly convince them that you are doing everything possible in your power to help yourself already. And if you can frame any conversation you have with a person on that basis of like, I am doing X, Y, Z, A, B, C to reach my goal. What else can I do? Right? Wow. You challenge that person to be like, yeah, I don't know what else you can do, but maybe I could help you, right? Because it's like that's the natural sort of flow. And so that's what I did. So I enrolled in a master's program at Georgetown. I started doing the CFA program. And this, again, with no finance background whatsoever. And then I started looking for a second job that would be more aligned. What I did was actually like weirdly similar to what I do now, in the sense that you're guiding people through a process and, you know, helping them not make big mistakes. But nobody was ready for that translation, right? Like you go to bankers like, oh, I do, you know, I sell e-discovery software and services, but they're like, I don't know what that is. Go away. But if you got this second job that was doing modeling for expert witness firms. So it was like a part of my existing job in terms of that it was in the legal sphere, but then it was a part of the new thing in the sense it was like, okay, you're going to get some modeling experience, right? And so I would go into these sit down coffee chats with a lot of ex-UCC people, and I would say, I'm doing boom, boom, boom. What else? What else can I do? I'll do it. And there wasn't a lot of answers to that. And so eventually what happened was I had, you know, one of my very close friends at the time, he was a few years ahead of me. He introduced me to a ton of people at BMO, and I ended up getting my first opportunity to do a co-op, which is, I live in America and they don't know what this co-op thing is, but in Canada, a co-op experience in the fall, a fall co-op experience in the BMO's Metals and Mining Group, which has a reputation of being a bit of a sweatshop. And it was a bit of a sweatshop. And so I didn't know what I was signing. Everybody knows that, you know, investment banking is investment banking, but this was like investment banking on steroids. And it was really tough, but it was a good gut check, right? To be like, do you really, you know, really want to do this? And the answer was like, yeah, I really want to do it. And for anybody interested in banking who's watching this, and maybe you three are also interested in banking, right? Like, the whole thing about banking, right, is like everybody knows being an analyst is very challenging. They're going to work you to the bone. Being an associate is very challenging. They're going to keep working to the bone. Being a VP is a little better, and then once you get above that, right, it's a lot better. Your responsibilities are more intense. You got to deliver a number. You have, sort of a more concrete thing you need to deliver, but you have more control over your time. But the key thing you got to remember when you're and this I think counts for not just being an IB analyst, but almost anything else, right? Is it's like if you were to make a pie chart at your retirement party of all the years you spent in your career, the very small little sliver is going to be those really tough years. Right? But that little sliver, it makes so many people quit. It makes so many people give up on themselves because they don't understand that, like, this is necessary, right? Like, you're not going to learn, you're not going to get where you need to be, you're not going to earn the respect of your peers, you're not going to sort of go through that same shared experience of like coming up the curve of sort of baptism by fire. But ultimately it is a sliver of that pie chart of how did I spend my life and career. And so if you can keep that perspective, right, you keep pushing through, and I certainly haven't pushed all the way through yet, but things do keep getting better, and the transition has been great, and it's a phenomenal profession.
For sure. Like, yeah, I know a lot of guys are interested in it, and I think the perspective on it being, a much smaller portion than you think it is. And when you're in it, you can't really think about a time when you're not going to be in it. And when you are past it, you can't believe you did it. So I fully understand that. I just want to
Jack, quick question for Stu about like what you said about that small pie chart. I've been thinking about this. Is this like kind of rite of passage? I mean, at UCC would love to use the word rite of passage, but is this like rite of passage unavoidable like in anything you do, like in this world, to like get to where you want? Or do you think there's a way around that rite of passage and like, have the best of both worlds and like do something you're interested in while like climbing high in the ladder, gaining respect from your peers?
No, I think unless you are that rare genius, that rare special person who's just perfectly suited for what you pursue and it's all easy. There's no free lunch, man. I mean, it's, I know, not to hit a cliche, but like there's nothing worth, the world is huge. There's 8 billion people now, right? And everybody's sort of armed with the facts of like, if I pursue this, I can get that. And so like, there's really just no, there's exceptions to this, obviously. But the exceptions are not accessible to people at large. If you're the exception, they're exception, and you're not listening to us say anything. But anything, worth having, other people want to. And if other people want it too, you're going to have to do something to differentiate yourself from all those other people. And, the best way to differentiate yourself from others who potentially have the same talents and skills as you is to be more resilient than them. And so the way that you do that, right, is when you get challenged as a new person in a new environment that has the potential for being something very, lucrative or special or unique or whatever it is you just have to outlast the other people who have the same skills as you, right? I mean, there's like, this is the whole thing for UCC guys. That's, I think in some ways UCC prepares you, in some ways it doesn't, right? Is that like, when you think about, upper echelons of capability and ability and sort of all that kind of stuff, right? Like we all went to a school that was, the design of it is that you're here with other people who are differentiated from their peers. You're around very, very, very smart, driven, capable people, right? And like keeping that perspective that like there's a big world out there, and no matter how smart, capable, driven you are, there's a whole demographic of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people in that 8 billion who have the same skill set, the same wants, the same desires. And the only way that you can actually be different from them or outlast and achieve the goal that you want to achieve in that very competitive environment is just getting through the sort of stretches of adversity and the challenges that make so many people quit.
Yeah, that is some powerful words there, and I agree. I think some guys have been through that already in like a much smaller scale, just from even if it's like UCC admissions, like that's
Yeah.
the bar. But today it's definitely going to be a different step, into the corporate world and things like that. But I just want to touch on, you've been through the ringer, but what do you think now that you're coming out of that into a more like, I don't know, you're looking over in your leadership position now. Like, what do you think is the most rewarding part of your career so far? And like, what should guys who want to pursue IB be looking forward to?
I mean, the thing to look forward to, right, is like, there's a lot to look forward to. I'm trying to think of the best things to look for. I mean, it's like, what was I looking for when I was making the transition? I think it's the same thing you guys are looking for in your careers, right? It's like, it's and going to the UCC themes of how do I teach, what's special about teaching boys, what's special about developing boys, right? Which is that if we're bored and unoccupied, we find trouble. Right? Like we all have a different appetite for engagement and complexity and challenge and all that kind of stuff, but if your appetite is not met, very hard to be fulfilled. And so if you're a person who has a large appetite to be challenged, to find yourself sort of constantly in new situations, to never be in a position, where you're feeling like you're on autopilot in your life, this is a great profession to pursue because, like, you say you're through the ringer. I mean, the ringer is like, I can't think of anyone who in this, I'm through, certain ringers, right? It's all relative, but like, it's ongoing, and that's what I like about it, right? It's like good that there's always a ringer because, like, that's the rewarding part. The rewarding part is, you're a hamster on the wheel and you're chasing something that you can never catch. And as long as you're sort of like comfortable with that dynamic that like, I'm never going to catch this thing, but it's actually like the process of chasing this uncatchable thing that like keeps me going, like keeps me fulfilled. Like that's what it is. And that's kind of the answer to the question is it's the cool thing is that no matter how much you feel is behind you in terms of, I've conquered this, I've met that challenge, I've done this, like, as long as you stay on this path, there's more of that coming, no matter where you go. And if you know yourself well enough to know that, like, I'm going to be a better person continuing to meet challenges down the road than I'm going to be if I'm, knowing I got a clear road ahead until, who knows what, right? Like, what is that, retirement? Like, I don't know what that even is. That's what's attractive is like, if you know yourself and that like being idle, being bored, all that stuff is not going to make you your best version of yourself. Like that's what's fulfilling about this is that it is hard, it is challenging. You have difficult personalities, you have like all of these things that on a day-to-day basis, you're like, why did I sign up for this? But on the macro, when you step back, it's like, well, I signed up for this because the alternative is just no good.
Yeah.
Good point. Lot of good info there, and I think that's a lot for us to kind of reflect on. I think because like you've gotten through that grind and have that perspective that obviously we don't have because we're just starting out. So a lot of good info there, Stu. We appreciate that. I guess our last few questions here, or maybe even our last question, is just what goals and objectives do you have for your future, in terms of kind of building off of what you've achieved and the experiences you've had?
So the next thing that comes in, right? Like this is the way life works, right? Like you do school and then you've got to like layer like the professional on top of the school, and then you get to the professional, and then oh, like the family thing. You got to layer the family thing on. So I've been married for a while. I had my first son 3 years ago, about a little short of 3 years ago, and I'm expecting my second son here in March, very soon. And so what keeps me going, what's exciting now is, you like we were just talking about, you figure out this is sort of the equation, this is how it works there. But the next cool thing is that, right? Is it's your family. That's the big challenge. That's the, okay, I've got this wheel working well work-wise, right? I'm keeping that going. Okay, let's throw some more complexity into the mix. Let's build a family on top of that. And so, that's what my wife and I are doing. We're building our family, and then we're going to see if we can keep all these different things up in the air. But that's been, I mean, I got to tell you, before we got on this call, I'm working from, it's Friday, and we're still in the COVID, post-COVID thing. So I'm working from home, and I've got to spend so much time with my son today between calls and, between different things. And, being a dad is, it's exceptionally fulfilling. And, it's again, still youngish, right? So the family's coming together, everything's sort of building up, but perfecting that mix between continuing to progress things on the professional side while still being, hopefully a good dad. I think that's the next thing.
Dude,
I think the question we're all wondering is, are you going to send the boys to UCC?
Great question. You know what? I mean, could you think of anything better? I couldn't. I'm gonna have to consult with Jack on some Muskoka property, some Muskoka real estate, though, to figure out the best way to do that, because I think have the sons in boarding, and then live up somewhere near Muskoka, somewhere Georgian Bay, and have them come up for the weekends. That sounds like a nice little life.
Super difficult.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, well, Stu, I think that's an awesome place to wrap it up. Looking to the future, and that's awesome. Thanks again for your time, and a really informative conversation. I think a lot of the guys listening are gonna really understand that all the paths don't have to be the same. You can kind of go your own direction. As long as you're focused, you'll get there. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys, for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it, and I wish you luck with this going forward, for sure.
Thank you, Stu.
Thank you. Appreciate it.